what there is, classically, there is the Kalam cosmological argument, which is the idea of causality. It's linked to causality. And you're right to suggest that in order for the whole process to work, the secondary stage, which is that the universe had a beginning, would have to be proved. And there is scientific evidence for the fact that the universe had a beginning. Whether that evidence is absolute or not is a good discussion to have. You can't say it's absolute.
No,
Sound good,
not
yeah?
at all, yeah?
So instead of discussing the cosmological argument, which I was just using as kind of like a tangential point actually, I want to discuss the contingency argument, which is actually in many ways more impressive. I'll tell you why. If we say that everything that began to exist is dependent upon something else. Now, in order for you to reject this premise...
Well, what is the premise though? I don't quite understand.
Okay, everything that began to exist depends upon something else.
In what sense?
For its existence. So, like for example, I've got a mobile phone, right?
Yeah.
This mobile phone began to exist. Someone made it in a factory somewhere. Now, this mobile phone has a battery inside, and for some reason, they are not allowing us to take the batteries out of the phones nowadays, right? You know this. But anyways, if the battery depletes and dies, what will be necessary for me to do is put charger inside, yeah? Okay. So in other words, the phone is dependent upon the electricity of the charger in order to be operational.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, no controversies there, hopefully,
Sure,
yeah?
that's fine. Yeah.
So the phone is dependent upon the charger.
Yeah.
The charger depends upon some nuclear power plant, and so on and so forth. What I'm saying is that anything that began to exist, like the phone, like yourself, like me and you, like the tree on the background, depends upon something else in order for it to exist. Does that make sense?
It makes sense in using simple objects like your phone and people on grass and trees, but when you're talking about the universe, again, I don't have a sort of strong opinion on what is.
Well, I haven't talked about the universe. Fine. Let's not talk.
That's where you're. I assume that's
Okay,
where you're going
right.
with it.
Let's not talk.
to a small amount
Let
of
me
it,
let me shift it. Let me shift it one more time. Let me shift it one more time. Let's take away all time element from it. Anything with limited variables depends upon something else. By definition. Anything with limited variables depends upon something else.
What's your definition? What do you mean by limited variable?
Okay, so it's not unlimited in its composition. That's what I mean. So for example, going back to my phone example.
But I think the phone's is not a great answer because it's something that we've created. Let's talk about.
Why isn't? Oh, okay, but it's an entity in existence, right?
Yeah.
So I'm saying that this phone has limited variables.
Yes,
Okay.
we understand. Yeah,
Accepted.
yeah.
So it's not unlimited in its composition.
Yeah.
Now, this thing which has limited variables and is not unlimited in its composition depends upon something else.
I agree.
Okay. Now, what I'm saying is that just like this phone, anything that has limited variables depends upon something else. Now, are you able to find me an example of something that isn't in that category of things?
That isn't
That-
limited.
Something that has limited variables but is independent. In other words, does not depend upon anything else.
Not singular objects, no. But again, I assume where you're going with this is.
No, forget about where we're going.
Well, that's important though, because that.
No, I know it's important, but do you know, an objective mind. Can I be fair
No,
with you
I'm
guys?
agreeing with what you're saying on each stage.
But Sam, can I tell you something? What you're doing here is we're not playing a game of chess, okay?
Sure.
Because if it was a game of chess, okay, you'd be looking at the steps that would potentially come afterwards,
Sure,
right?
I understand you're not trying to trick me into saying-
An objective person, a scientist, a mathematician, a logician, a truth seeker, ought to just look at the premise as it is and try and objectively examine that premise. Then, if you find that that premise is faultless, is not problematic, then we can proceed to the next premise. Now, if you feel like, okay, I don't want to grant my interlocutor this premise, because if I grant my interlocutor this premise, he'll trap me in the next stage, then what that shows is that there's an agenda behind your reasoning. Whereas if you're saying to yourself, look, forget about it,
I
let's
understand.
let's
I
just...
understand. So therefore, to answer your original question, there is a possibility that the universe is unlimited.
I'm not talking about the universe is unlimited. I just asked you anything.
therefore there was not
No, just the first
no
premise. Just the first premise here we're talking about. anything with limited variables depends upon something else in order to exist.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree.
Now, the universe has limited variables.
So, I think there is one answer that he's maybe missing.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
which is-
What's your name, first of all?
It's Andy.
How you doing, Andy?
Okay, nice to meet
All three of you now.
Sorry to get
No, I want all the
very
minds to come
interesting
together.
ideas.
Let's bring the minds together.
The thing would be, when you say the phone came into existence,
Yeah, yes.
in a way, that's our one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is that the phone's always been, and
Okay.
they've
But
always
I've not said
been
that the
there.
phone is coming to. That's not my argument. All I've said is that this phone depends upon something else in order to exist. That is my point. So my premise here, guys, and I want you to lose this premise, is that anything with limited variables depends.
I don't understand that bit.
Okay. Limited variables means that it's not unlimited in its composition. Let me give you an easy example, okay?
As in, there is a finite number of atoms that
Finite number of no, not atoms. I'm just saying finite number of whatever it may be.
or whatever makes up the
Yeah,
the mass
whatever
of the
makes
world,
up this phone.
Yeah.
Silicone or whatever it may be, it's finite, right? It's not infinite in its nature, is it? Like, for example, me, I'm composed of blood and tissue and water and all these things, right? But there's a finite number of those variables inside of my physical, biological frame. What I'm saying is that anything with such a description, which is finite in its composition, depends upon something else in order to exist. That's all I'm saying.
So does God have infinite variables?
We're not talking about God. God is out of the discussion at the
Said,
moment.
Can you think of a thing
And
that
God
has
wouldn't be
finite variables
because-
We can
that
talk about
wasn't
God.
brought into
Okay,
existence?
if you want to. Okay, God, we would say, but what we would say, just to answer that kind of question, is God is not finite. Simple. The definition of God is that He is infinite in His mercy, His knowledge, etc. So He would be not in the category of things that we've just described.
I come back to that. Like that tree, is that God? Obviously not. The tree isn't God, so God can't be infinite because He would include the tree. If there's
No.
something that isn't God, surely it's finite, would be my...
Yeah, exactly. So you're right. Something which isn't God is finite. That's correct.
But God isn't the tree,
That's right.
so
Therefore,
He's finite.
He is finite.
No, why would that mean? No, why is that the case?
Well,
If
He's
God isn't
not
the tree, so the tree is finite. So if He wasn't the tree, why would that make Him himself finite?
Well, because therefore
Because
the God
he's
is
something
everything
that-
apart from the tree.
We didn't say He's
Therefore,
everything.
Well, fine, but he's.
Oh yes, actually.
He's what? Oh, okay. Are you saying that He's unlimited in that He's occupying every crevice of creation?
No, that's what I'm suggesting. You're almost saying. If
No,
he is
we don't believe
unlimited,
that.
he
We don't
constitutes
believe
everything.
that. That's
think
not our
there's some-
conception of theology, right?
Yeah, but there's some. I don't really understand this variable thing, but it just seems to be words. this
Okay,
variable
everything is
thing.
words. If I said to you, listen,
No,
every human being is mortal, is that a controversial statement, guys? Really? No. If I said Socrates is a human being, would you have a problem with that? Would you honestly have a problem with that? If I said every human being is mortal, is there a problem?
No.
Is there no problem? Socrates is a human being.
Yes,
He is.
yes, yes.
Are you sure?
It was.
He was okay. Well, he was a human being. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if we're being like, yeah.
Right.
If we're
Okay.
being specific, we don't know that for sure.
Therefore, Socrates was mortal. Okay. See how you were able to simply follow the logic in that. There was no controversy. I could have said, listen, hold on. Premise number 2, Socrates, we don't know if he existed or not. I could say that. We only know that Socrates existed through Plato, actually. He hasn't written any of his own books. How do we know he existed? We can't see his tomb. But you just easily went from premise 1 to premise 2 to premise 3.
I think so. Going back to the last sort of step we were at, you said, I think, as far as I'm aware, I agree that anything that has limited variables
Is dependent.
is dependent on something, unless we use this sort of concept where we're all
Yeah.
created from stardust and atoms.
Right.
Therefore, those
Yes.
atoms have
Fine.
united to
So
form
if
a
you
human body, which
good.
has formed a.
So the
a
universe has limited variables. Is that accepted?
That's where I stop.
Okay. Is the universe not in? Is the universe unlimited in its variables? The amount of stars that compose the universe, the amount of black holes that are in the universe, the amount of helium that's in the universe, is that limited or unlimited?
It's unlimited in its.
It's not
It
unlimited.
could be unlimited in its time scope, though.
No, it's not. It's,
Well, that's where we disagree.
I'm just saying that
that's
it's-
where we can't ever know.
first and foremost, we're not talking about time. We're talking about variables, which are independent from time.
Sure,
But also what you're saying is that they are finite in so much as physical matter that we can register at the moment what they're moving into. The concept of space, is it truly empty that they're moving into, or is there something there that we can't yet understand?
Whether it's empty, okay, that's good. Whether it's empty or not empty, okay, that's aside the point. Because if they're moving into something, this is actually indicative of the fact that they must be finite by their nature. If the universe is expanding, do you accept the universe is expanding?
Yes.
If you accept that the universe is expanding, then you, by virtue of necessity, actually, must accept that the universe is finite and not infinite. Because it cannot, something which is infinite cannot increase in number and size.
Okay, but
Do you understand this point?
Yeah, I understand what you're trying to say.
okay, but I think going back to the last step that we were at, I suppose a exception to that point is if something has always existed anyway, even if it is limited in its variable.
That's what we're saying. That's begging the question for me.
No,
because I've just said to you that I don't believe such an entity does exist. You made it conditional and then said if something has existed but it's always been there. I'm saying that, where is an example of that?
Just go back to the phone example.
Yes.
So we agreed that this has been, it's the limited variable and that it is caused by something. If this has always existed for eternity.
Yeah, but that if, for me, is a non-relevant if. It's like saying if, there's a multiverse and therefore there's been, this conversation has taken place before, sometime in the future. For me, that if is unsubstantiated.
Why?
I can say
Why?
There's an unlimited amount of ifs that I can presuppose to any given situation.
But
we shouldn't use it to block logical pathways from taking place.
It's not blocking. It's not blocking.
Yeah.
We're just using. I'm using the phone. I'm not saying the phone's actually existed forever.
Right.
I'm just saying imagine using it as a metaphorical example.
Okay. Hypothetical.
Imagine the phone has existed for eternity.
Yes.
Although it is limited in its variables. If it
But-
has existed for eternity, then nothing has caused it. 'Cause it's always been.
My presupposition.
So nothing needs to cause the phone. if it's always
My
been.
contention is exactly this.
Yeah.
I'm saying that it's not possible for something with limited variables to forever exist,
Well, that's where.
and without being dependent. In order for that, my contention to be disproved, you'd have to give me a live example.
I don't have to.
Yes, you do. That's how science works, in fact.
could-
Science works in falsification terms.
No, that's not how science
Of course
works.
it works like that.
It's not.
Of course it is.
Science is, here's a theory.
Yeah,
Let's try and test to see if we can prove it or disprove it.
yeah. And then what do you put after that?
I have a theory and I cannot prove or disprove
Hold
it.
on.
So
When you've done that, you put your scientific theory in where?
I've neither proved it, but I haven't disproved it either.
No. That's not the way science works. Science works is, okay,
Ju-
you've got
ju-
hypothesis,
just-
experimentation,
just-
and then then you put it into peer-reviewed journals, right? Then it's the job of other scientists to falsify that whatever it is that you
Yes,
put.
but some things you
So
can't
in other,
disprove. Just as we agree, we can't disprove the existence of a God. Therefore, I am not.
No,
a
now you're
100%
conflating the
atheist.
physical and the metaphysical. Here, the physical is where, because science has naturalistic presuppositions. It has a methodological naturalism as its base. In other words, you cannot put under a microscope things which are metaphysical. You can only put under a microscope that which is physical. Now, you've made a statement about physical entities, not metaphysical entities. You talked about the phone, which is actually a physical entity. So I'm saying that my contention today is that we have not yet found in the history of the world an example of something which is limited in its variables, yet independent. And if you have
Surely the whole universe.
We haven't
as
disproved.
Best we know,
Yeah.
as
but
best
that's
we
not.
know, the
Can you
universe-
prove that it's independent?
No,
This theory, matter can't be created or destroyed.
No. I'm saying. So you're saying matter cannot. That's within the circle of the universe.
Yes.
Within the circle of the universe.
Yes.
Right. So that once again wouldn't apply.
Okay,
Well,
so
it would,
just.
but-
Within it's a closed circle.
Sorry.
So the context in which that which what you said, energy can't be created, would only work within the circuit of the universe.
Yes.
Yes. So if the universe came into existence,
Well, no one says it did.
pardon?
No one's saying it did come into existence.
If the universe came, so it's just always been there in your mind.
Yes, yes.
That's where the contention
That's
is.
what
Oh, okay,
We're
all right.
suggesting.
All right, fine. So
as far
fine.
as people understand.
Even if you say that the universe has always been there,
Yeah.
you still have to recognize that the universe is composed of a limited amount of variables.
I sort of see where you're it seems almost as if you're just doing the cause argument.
It's not a cause. This is called this is the contingency argument. So here, the contingency
I
argument.
agree with you. I agree that I believe that the universe is contained of limited variables. I think.
Okay, good.
I
So if
believe
we go to
that,
the next stage
yeah.
now, because we don't want to spend too much time.
Sure.
If that's the case, if the universe is composed of limited variables, number one. Number two, and that which has, we said, number one, that which is limited in its variables depends upon something else. Number two,
we decided we didn't agree with that.
why have you got anything to prove it? Disprove it.
Yes, but just the universe.
No, I can't prove or disprove it.